All right, welcome everyone to today's edition of Freelance Coffee, a podcast series where we interview the most successful online freelancers and consultants. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Matt Keener, and I've been freelancing online now for about a decade, and you can read more about me at executiveinsweatpants.com. Today, I'm super pumped to be interviewing Karwanna Dyson, or she goes by Karwanna D. She's a multimedia specialist and founder of She's Got Goals, LLC. And Karwanna and I go way back too, so I'm excited to have you here, Karwanna, and look forward to hearing your story. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm really excited. I've been excited and waiting for this day to just kind of catch up with you and share my story and, just kind of, hopefully inspire other people.
Excellent. Well, I know you've got an awesome story, so I'm going to get out of the way here. And, why don't you start at the beginning and back just before you and I met and kind of tell us how you got to where we got today.
Yeah. So I want to say, like, when I first really started my business as a freelancer, a real freelancer, I didn't really know, about business. I didn't really understand like the whole landscape of, freelancing and like this whole digital world of opportunities that are out there and how people were looking for, people to pay to do like little tasks and stuff like that. But like I went through this program, I think it was through SAMA USA. This is like super years ago. SAMA USA, and they actually started sharing with me how to really grow a business with freelancing, right? So it started like they introduced me to opportunities like with TaskRabbit and Elance and Odesk and like all of these other platforms that I never knew existed. And then they also introduced me, to you about like for an opportunity to like freelance writing, like blogging, right? Getting paid to blog. And so, back then, I want to say that I really didn't know anything, but like this was like the first time that I really understood the power of having a skill, right? And being willing to do the work and then finding those people who are putting out opportunities, to pay you to do those tasks. And so being a very skillful person who back then, was just doing everything under the sun, from like photography to video production, like anything, like opportunities to teach people how to dance at their parties and all this stuff. Awesome. And so when you first have an opportunity to do something that you love and get paid for it, it kind of like opens your mind, right? Opens your mind that the possibility that you got paid. So it kind of validates you, right? And then it helps you to understand that there's more. And so that's kind of like where I started, right? So since then, like, we'll get into that. I'm pretty sure you have a bunch of questions that you want to ask, but, since then, like, I really was able to take my business from barely knowing anything, barely getting paid to like, a multiple six-figure business, and then starting a second business that's like a six-figure business. And so, but it all started with that first opportunity. It all started, with the freelance opportunity.
Unreal. Yeah. That's so great. I mean, and that's the thing. It's like you mentioned, you've got to just start doing something, right? You've got to start and kind of see where the opportunities are. And then once you take that first step, then you realize that there's other people out there that can help you along in your journey, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And yeah, definitely there's other people out there who, I remember when I first read The Executive in Sweatpants and learned about you and like how you were able to, grow your business like from home. That was very inspiring to me. I'm like, wow. And if he can do it, I can do it. Right. So like, I was really inspired. And I remember writing my story on your blog and talking about from inner city to online success, right? And even then when I wrote that blog, it was like I was predicting what was to come, because I was talking about where I came from, just struggling, coming from the hood and, being the first college graduate and having all of these business dreams and wanting to build my way out of poverty, using my business and everything like that. And so when I look back, I look at all the milestones and I'm like, I'm here, right? I did it, right? Like I grew up in a hood and like now I'm like investing in properties and I'm like, I'm able to cash out on these properties and, really position myself, for growth and development, and then help others, right? So the same way that I believe like you opened up an opportunity for me to blog for you and get paid, like that kind of lit the fire. And so now I open up opportunities to help other people, really grow their business, like creating, sharing with them the blueprint and the milestones of, the pathway, that I had.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, Karwanna, why don't you, for those of us on the podcast here that, for those listeners that maybe haven't heard your story, could you give us kind of a brief recap of what you talked about in that article, just your background and how you kind of got into the SAMA program? Because I know that was a pivotal point for you as well.
It was, yeah. So, so I actually, let me see, where did I start? So I grew up in San Francisco, right, in an urban community. And when I was growing up, it was just like, there was a lot of violence, in the 90s, and, there was a lot of violence. And so in the urban community, you see that becomes the norm. People go to jail, and it's like this pathway to pipeline to prison is what they call it, basically. And if you're growing up in this area, it's just like you're either going to be a teen mom or in jail or on drugs. And so there was really not a lot of hope. It wasn't a lot to look up to. But for me, like, I always wanted to beat the odds. Okay, so I always wanted to beat the odds. I came from a family of 7, right? My mom was a single parent, 7, so she was we were like lower working middle class, but, she worked all the time to provide for 7 kids. And that was a lot. And so we didn't really get all the things that we wanted. We had what we need. we had what we needed. Right. And so I knew at a very early age that I wanted to have more. I didn't want to struggle. I didn't want to have to work my fingers to the bones, to provide for my family. And I wanted to have choices. I wanted to have choices in life, and so starting a business was like the beginning of that. Like, even with freelancing, I didn't really know the blueprint or the roadmap when I first started it, but I believed that it was possible to start somewhere, right? And so I started with freelance opportunities, and I started doing gigs here and there, and then I learned about running a real business, right? Turning that freelance opportunity into something bigger, right? So starting getting clients and learning about how to have consistent, sustainable income. And then I learned about, socioeconomic statuses and how you can leverage those statuses to do business with the government, right? Which is like a huge client. And so I was like, oh, I can land the government as a client. Let me do that, right? Like, it's freelance, but it's freelance on steroids, right?
Yeah.
And so that's when I was able to really start building consistent sustainability, really growing my business from leaps and bounds, from barely making 20K a year to over, multiple 6 figures a year, doing business with the government, and also still doing small gigs on the side. And so just basically starting from, I feel like that's my hood story. I feel like it's a true hood story. It's just like really starting from nothing and building an empire and seeing how possible it is and learning, right? But it takes like commitment. Right. You have to be willing to learn, to listen, to go through, all the pain of, what it takes to become a CEO and to grow into an entrepreneur and all of these things. Right. It doesn't happen overnight. But if you don't give up, right, as long as you don't give up and take every moment as a stepping stone and to learn along the way, then you can really develop into something that's beautiful. And so from that, starting with my multimedia business, from that, like really being able to position myself for success, I decided that like my passion is to help other people as well. So I started She's Got Goals, which is the coaching and consulting firm
Awesome.
that I use to empower other women, like to teach them about entrepreneurship, about the business foundation, about business credit, about doing business with the government, right? And so believe it or not, the government has so much money that they're just pretty much giving away. But you got to, of course, do the services, do the work.
Right.
But they have all of these opportunities for small business owners to become employers. And so, yeah. And so that's what I do. That's what I do now. I still have the best of both worlds. I'm still, freelancing in my business with the government as a major client, but I'm also, empowering and coaching other women and teaching them how to do this as well. And so,
Fantastic. Yeah, I mean, there's so many questions I could ask you right now. One that comes to my mind, I know when I was making the transition from corporate America to kind of doing my own thing, I got I had to get used to the fact that I was weird and that people thought that I was a little bit out there, and because it's so different. And I would imagine, especially with your background and
Yeah.
you're such a unique success story, how did you deal with some of the, naysaying or negativity that you probably encountered along the way?
You know what? That's a really great question. And I want to say like during the time when I was freelancing through SAMA and blogging for you, like I went to this lady that I knew who was a business owner. She had a really successful childcare. And I was like, this is the name of my company. It's Big Mouth Productions, and this is what I want to do. Right. I want to have a video production company. I want to teach other people how to do it. I want to show them how to use freelance skills
Yeah.
to get themselves out of poverty. Because it's possible. You can do
Yeah.
that, right? To leverage your skills. I want to teach them skills to help them eliminate themselves out of poverty, right? And so she was like, oh, it's impossible. It's other companies that's already out there doing it, right? It's bigger companies with a lot more money and the skills and the staff to do it. And so I didn't allow her to, I mean, it kind of dampened my spirit a little bit, but I had that mindset of watch like watch me do it, right?
Awesome.
And so like I like every time I try to go pop up at her daycare, she's never there, because I really want to show her like this is what I've been able to do. These are all the people that I've helped. I've helped people freelance themselves into a business, I've shown people how to make money. I learned how to turn my freelance business into a full-time business and work for myself. So anything is possible. So anyone that can naysay, basically give you, basically put roadblocks up for you, I would say believe in yourself more than you believe in, what other people are saying. Because that's where it comes from. That's what the real success starts with, what you believe, right? Because you have the power to speak things into existence. You have the power to create the life that you desire. Right? You can design the life that you want to live, but it starts with what you believe, right? And that starts with mindset. So I had to go through a lot of professional development of my mindset so that I could understand who I was, stand in my power, right? Create and design the life that, that I want. And and also never take no for an answer. And if anybody says it's impossible, then you be the one that say, I'm going to show you that it is possible.
Awesome. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
You mentioned professional development. What are some tips and strategies that you've employed? I mean, do you read a lot of books? Do you listen to audiobooks? What's your go-to strategy for that?
All of the above. Like first, I really just kind of like guard the gateway of what I take in. Like I don't watch a lot of news.
That's right. Negative. I'm the same way. I'm out.
All this negative stuff. Like I don't, because
put a bubble around my head.
But I put a bubble around myself, because if you don't, right, you'll be thinking the world is on fire and it's going to end tomorrow. Right. and so like really I really guard myself, my space, and like what I take in, and I connect with success leaders like online, like through YouTube, and listen to podcasts like Zig Ziglar. Oh my God, he's an amazing success leader. Jack Canfield and John Maxwell is my favorite. So I read a lot of books from success leaders, and I also listen to a lot of podcasts, motivational stuff. And then, I try to, whenever I'm overwhelmed, I really just, tap into those positive, channels and just kind of meditate. Like I listen to a lot of meditational music or classical music just to kind of like reset. And then I listen to, powerful music like This Girl Is on Fire, just kind of lights the bulb again. It's like, let's go, you know? So yeah, so
you and I are on the same page on a lot of that. I mean, John Maxwell, classical music. I mean, I've got two different playlists. One is for like in the morning, kind of get me into the day, and then another one is more like my writing, creative playlist. It's got a lot of like Vivaldi and really upbeat stuff. So I love that. That's fantastic. Maybe let's pivot a little bit here and talk about what's interesting, especially about how you've pivoted kind of a traditional freelance business into this kind of government sector focus. Mm-hmm. And I think for a lot of freelancers, they would never think about that. They just kind of go out and myself included, it's like You leverage existing relationships a lot of times. You leverage opportunities that come along online. But it sounds like you've kind of strategically gone in that public sector,
Yeah.
into the public sector. So maybe talk about how did you get your start there, and what kind of tips would you give people that are thinking
Yeah.
about moving that
Yeah.
direction?
Good question. So first I just like when I was really on the pathway to growing my business, I was like really trying to figure out how to create something that was consistent and sustainable, right? So that I wouldn't have to go back to work because I had children and I wanted to, be the stay-at-home mom and be able to be at field trips and never miss a moment. So that was very key for me. Okay. And so in order for me to do that, of course, I had to figure out a way to make business work for me, right? To work less hours and get full-time income. And so I actually started asking questions because like there were some people that I was, in particular, there was like a great mentor of mine. His name is Cliff Birch. He had a really successful business. He had grown his business from zero, we're from the same neighborhood, all that stuff, from zero to a multi-billion-dollar business. And I was freelancing for him, helping him build his website, his doing his video production stuff, his portfolio, his bio, so he can have a really amazing online presence. And so I was like, so I asked the question, so how were you able to do this? And he said to me, the same way that you're doing this freelance work for me, you can do it for the government, right? And get paid big dollars. And so I learned everything from there. I learned everything that I needed to know about how to do that. And so I discovered what I coined the $1 trillion secret to government contracting, which is like my first ebook that I had wrote and published like a few years ago.
Awesome.
It's called the $1 trillion secret to government contracts. I learned that the government love small businesses, first of all, and that they have set aside budgets to help small businesses grow, which means no matter what service that you provide, the government has contracting opportunities for you. And there's a certain percentage of their $1 trillion annual spend that goes to women in business, small businesses, minority businesses, disadvantaged and, struggling businesses, right? And so it doesn't matter if you paint walls. It doesn't matter if you do copywriting. It doesn't matter if you do janitorial services or you're a speaker or a trainer, right? There are contracts out there. And so I discovered that there are contracts that are set aside for me as a woman, minority, disadvantaged. I fit into a whole lot of bubbles, right? A whole lot of, I want it all. So I was like, first of all, you got to certify your business under those statuses in order to qualify for those government contracts. So I went through that process. And then like the first contract that I landed, which was a freelance job, because, you're not working for anybody but yourself. And it was $70,000 and I had to do 28 days of work taking photos, right? So mind you, when you take photos, that's like 2 hours on the job, right? So 28 days. 2 hours, that's like less than 50 hours for $70,000. And I saw that was very, very, very powerful. And I thought initially when that happened, I thought it was a mistake. I thought somebody messed up. They gave me all this money. What happened? Because I had never seen that type of an opportunity before. But then I realized that, oh, okay, I did something right. And I went back and figured out, well, what did I do to get this, right? And so I repeated those steps and saw that it worked again. Repeated those steps and saw that it worked again. And then the contracts got larger, and then, so they started coming simultaneously, all of these things. And so I was like, there's this is the missing piece. Like I'm going to stick over here to the government side because they're really consistent. They pay large amounts. They value your work and they want to see small businesses grow. And so that's the niche that I ended up in, doing business, for the government. And I created a blueprint to show other other small business owners how to do it. And according to the SBA standard, small business is considered any business that has under 500 employees, right? So if it's just you, right, then you're considered a small business and you're disadvantaged. And so the government has money for you, right? And so I show other people how to do that. I show them exactly how to get certified, right? The steps for those social economic statuses. And then I also show them how to bid on these contracting opportunities for their business so they can have consistent, sustainable income, So that's
wow.
it.
So when you say government, do you mean, is that like federal contracts or local, state? Is it all of the above?
Yeah, all of the above. All of the above. So we're talking about on a local, where your city and county, there's certifications as a local business that you can participate in those contracting opportunities. And then on the state, as a basically a state certified disadvantaged business, it opens up opportunities for you to do business with like different state agencies. For instance, the Department of Transportation, the airport, like all of these other agencies on the state level, the Department of General Services, and then on the federal level, you can do business with like the Department of Army, the Department of Defense, like all of the federal agencies, and which will allow you to do contracting in multiple states across the U.S. And so it helps you to build capacity. And so there's different levels of certifications. There's federal, there's the state, and then there's the local. And then when you go after them all, it just opens up that many more opportunities to do business with the government. So your city and county, that's a government agency, right? The Department of Education, the schools, that's a government agency. The Department of Treasury, the Department of Forestry, like there's so many, Public Works, like all of these, the utility, like the gas and electric, like all of these companies have a contracting, basically small business contracting program where they're set aside to help you grow your business.
Interesting. So I guess maybe let's talk a little bit about, whether you're dealing with government contracts or other small businesses, larger corporations as clients. Somebody that is just getting started in freelancing, give them some tips. What is it that you would say in terms of, a lot of times people get into freelancing and they're just kind of dipping their toe in, and they're like, well, I'm doing this in part-time, or maybe I got laid off. There's a lot of people that are laid off right now because of the coronavirus. What's the first couple tips that come to mind as you think about a new freelancer?
I would say when you're new to freelancing, I would say figure out what it is that you really enjoy doing. Because when you're starting out, I mean, you're doing a little bit of everything just to get paid, right? But eventually you will find that there's some freelance opportunities that you enjoy doing more than others, right? So that is where you start with something that you really have a passion and desire, to do, right? And so that becomes like your niche or whatever it is that you do, right? So if it's, doing parties or catering, like catering events, then that is an opportunity for you to get real serious about that freelance opportunity and learn how to turn that into a really a big business opportunity, right? So starting with that, what it is that you're passionate about, and then understanding why you're passionate about it. Because when you do a lot of what you're passionate about, it doesn't feel like you're going to work, right? It feels like you're just having fun all day.
Yeah, that's right.
It really does. Yeah. So I would say, just understanding the opportunities that, that you have, like which of those opportunities that you enjoy doing the most, and then just kind of writing them down. And I do want to say this, for every opportunity or every freelance gig that you do, they have a code, right? They have these NEGS code, right? I don't know if you're familiar with that, but they have this website called negs.com, right? That's where you identify your code. So every code that you see on the negs.com website, there's contracting dollars that's attached to those codes. And so the reason why I say that is because, everything, even including freelance opportunities, there's value. There's value in what you do. And so I share this example about daycare, right? So if you're like a babysitter, right? So let's say you're doing freelance and babysitting, and eventually you want to open up your own daycare. So how valuable do you think a childcare provider is? Very valuable, because when you think about it from the perspective of opportunities that open up, that childcare provider may provide like 7 different services that they haven't even thought about because they're thinking childcare, right? So, but if you really think about what goes into childcare, we have daycare services, we have after school services, we have nutritional services because you're feeding kids, we have tutorial services because you're doing homework with kids. Sometimes, there's peer-to-peer counseling because, the kids are in 2 different households and the parents are conflicting with each other. And then if you do photographies like school day pictures or whatever, then there's photography services. So those are 6 different services, all of which you can get a contract for, right? And so every opportunity, every skill is very valuable. And there's a client out there who will pay you, for every single aspect of your business.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that's the thing, is that a lot of people don't think about contracting with the government because it's not necessarily, they're not connected to the government necessarily the way that you would be another small business owner. But the reality is that the government has made this decision through legislation or whatever to spend these dollars, and whether spending $1 trillion a year is a good idea or not financially, it is what it is, and business owners need to go out and pursue those if it's something that makes sense for their business model.
Absolutely. And you're absolutely right, because never in a million years would I ever thought like, oh, the government is going to be a client, because you don't think that. You don't connect business with government, right?
No.
The government is like, from our perspective, like the government is this other thing, like the entity or maybe the monster, right? You think that.
Place I write that check to every quarter,
Exactly. But realistically, what I learned is that the government, you don't think of, like, when you do business with the government, they're a client, right? So they're just a client. You just think of them as a client that's already guaranteed spending money on your services. So when you're doing your market research and really trying to grow your freelance business into a business, and you're like, who's my target market? And like, who's already spending money on, who's buying my services? The government is a top paying buyer of services, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, you can't deny that. You can't ignore that. And so if you're in business to do business and to get clients, here's a client that says, hey, I'm looking for you.
Yeah. And I think that's a challenge for a lot of freelancers, it's myself included, because there's only so many ways that you can either work 1,000 hours a day. You can try to raise your hourly rate, which takes time and expertise. You can try to bring on more freelancers to help you and subcontract, but that gets messy sometimes. And you can try to like take your services and package them into kind of fixed price opportunities, which can be beneficial for clients. I've done that myself. But that's kind of that other factor that a lot of freelancers never think of is who are the people that are buying these services in large chunks, essentially.
Exactly.
And it is what it is. So
longer terms, right? So it's like, there's a difference, like you said, in chasing individual customers or individual businesses and having to have volume to reach your financial goal at the end of the year versus landing a contract that locks you in at a certain dollar price, over like 2 years or 5 years. These are longer terms. It's guaranteed income every single month.
Would you say that the expectations of your public sector clients are similar, greater than, less than private sector clients? I mean, how do you, I think some people might be a little nervous to be like, well, I'm working with the government now as a client. It seems like it's a even higher stakes opportunity, really.
Yeah, I would say that is similar, right? They give you a scope of work, right? And so when you're actually bidding on that and quoting your price, you're saying, hey, I'm going to give you what you asked for. So you just deliver. So even with a individual client, you're delivering. You have to give them what you said you're getting paid for that you would deliver, right? If that makes sense, right? So it's the exact same. So they basically, they give you a scope of work. You say, hey, I can do that for X, Y, and Z, right? And then you, of course, you want to have, you want to know that you can deliver that. And you want to, of course, care about how your quality of work is, right? You don't want to just give anything, but they'll pay you what you're worth. They'll pay you what you ask for. And then, because you want to, again, do business with them again and build your brand and build your name and have them just throwing contracting opportunities after you, you want to, deliver on time. You want to deliver quality work. So
would you say that building relationships with the people at the agencies is similar to building relationships with private sector clients? Like, you just want to, follow up and make sure that you're talking to people regularly. And what other tips would you give people?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's so they have like these events. They have like, whenever they have put something out to bid, they have what's called a pre-bidding conference where you can go and you can meet like the procurement officers, you can meet the agency leaders and all that. And so the more you go to those, the more they're familiar with you, the more they're familiar with the services that you provide, the more they'll start, hey, reaching out to you and saying, hey, this is an opportunity coming down the pipeline, those things. So it's really just being present. It's the same as, building relationships at networking events with other people, just being present, following up with them. They're accessible, like you can email them, you can schedule time to meet with them one-on-one. And so they're just as accessible as, regular people.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So as you started to scale your business from doing odd jobs and freelancing to doing these major contracts with, big entities, I would, and you mentioned that you have children and you're trying to balance all these different things.
Yeah.
What tips do you have for people, like, because I think that that's a real concern for especially working moms. You know, how do I keep it all organized and balanced and
Yeah.
avoid, sacrificing too much in one area?
Yeah. Yeah. So again, I want to share with you, like, the first contract that I landed was $70,000, right? To some people, that's their annual salary working for someone else, right?
Mhm.
And that was for 28 days of work. Okay. So 28 days, if you're okay with the $70,000, 28 days, you have all the rest of the year to spend time with your family and do whatever it is that you want to do. Or
Yeah.
just imagine, even if you landed two, right? That's a six-figure business, right? Way less than part-time work. So it really allows you the ability to kind of like basically get your time back, get paid amazing income, spend time with your family if you want. Like, you get to decide how much you want to take on. You get to decide how many contracts you want to have, and you can have them simultaneously. So really, you get to decide, your scheduling. You get to, there's a lot of flexibility in it as well. And even times like this where, where there's, pandemic in the world and people are at home, the government is still open. And so, there's still contracting opportunities for you to do work online, remotely. And then, like, even in person, like construction is like basically an essential service. And so
Yep.
I'm still doing a lot of work, in construction, like taking photos and stuff like that. But yeah, so it's a pandemic proof business, like a fail proof business. And so, while everyone else is shut down, like, here's an opportunity for you to really get in position, like, to prevent loss of income in the future. Like, you may lose some stuff, right? If it's like, if what you do involves events and gathering, like being around a lot of people, you may lose some income, but still, there's a lot of other opportunities, and there's a lot of flexibility and a lot of ways to, take your services online as well.
Right. How much work goes into winning one of these contracts? I mean,
Mhm.
you mentioned that big one, but
Yeah.
I'm imagining there's, number of hours and
Yeah.
thought
Hmm.
that goes into that.
Yeah. So it's definitely a process, and it is work, right? But most of the work, it comes from the beginning of positioning your business as an official government contractor. So there's a lot of paperwork that goes into that part. But once you're in position, then the opportunities are limitless, right? And so bidding on a contracting opportunity, it may take you a few hours to actually write out your proposal, right? It may take you a few hours. So that part is like, it's something that you want to do consistently, in order to get consistent work and to start having simultaneous contracts. But then once you get them, they last for about 2 years to maybe 5 years or whatever. And
Hmm.
then you just want to make sure you're landing more before that 5-year period is up, so you can keep things going, right? The momentum. And so there is, so it's not like you sit back and everything just comes to you. You do have to do the work, right? You do still have to look for opportunities and bid on them, and plan to spend at least a couple hours responding to contracting opportunities.
Yeah. And I think you mentioned that it's really open to any small business, not just women owned or minority
Yeah.
owned business. I mean, it
Yeah.
could be anybody that has less than 500 employees.
Yeah.
I'm sure that some
So
contracts have certain stipulations,
they
perhaps.
do.
Speak to
Yeah.
that.
So certain contracts have like certain stipulations. So say, for instance, if there's like a $1 million contract that goes to a small business, most of the time it'll have like a goal, like a 5% has to be, you have to sub out 5% of that work to a woman-owned business or whatever. But
Hmm.
any small business that has under 500 employees, qualifies as a small business. You qualify as a disadvantaged business, of course. And then the SBA has what's called the SBA small business size standard tool online. Like, you can Google that, and then you put in your code, like your NAICS code or the service that you provide, and they'll tell you if you're a small business, because they'll take like the average of your last 3 years revenues. And if it's over a certain amount, then you don't qualify. But if it's under a certain amount, then you do qualify on a federal level as a small business.
Interesting. Got it. Well, and you've mentioned this a couple times. I think you said, is it disadvantaged business? Is that the
Hmm.
right phrase? What's the
Yeah.
difference between, is that just basically based on revenue, or is that based on
Yeah.
your personal income, or what is that?
Yeah. So it's based on personal net worth. So it's
Okay.
based on personal net worth. And so the disadvantage of business certification basically allows you to do business with the Department of Transportation, which is like your local munis, your local transportation, trains, the airport, anything that has to do with transportation. Those are the contracting opportunities that it open up for you to have. And yeah, so it has to do with like your personal net worth. It has to be under a certain amount of millions. And so a lot of people qualify for that. A lot of small businesses, qualify for those opportunities. And so they just don't know,
Yeah.
but I remember, I think knowing is half the battle. I'll try to remember if I remember that from childhood, like He-Man or something like that. I used to talk about knowing is half the battle.
I've heard that phrase. I don't know, I don't know where it came from. Probably one of those 80s shows,
Yeah, it was. So a lot of people that don't know you're sleeping on money opportunities. You're sleeping on opportunities that are there, and it's there for you because because of like these thresholds, like because the SBA basically considers small businesses that are businesses under 500 employees and under a certain amount of millions and all that stuff. They believe that 90% of the employees employees are employed by small businesses, and they want to keep that going. And so they want to help you build capacity so that you can in turn, hire people from your community, basically continue to stimulate the economy, to eliminate and, decrease like unemployment rate. And so that's why they have these programs that are out here for small businesses.
Yeah. Well, I think this has really been eye-opening because, like I said, most of my focus is just private sector. So this is all new information to me. So I really appreciate that. And I would imagine if you had told yourself this, 7 or 8 years ago, it'd all be news to you too, probably.
Yeah,
So.
of course. And I do want to say that even outside of the government, like corporations, they have similar programs.
Oh, okay.
Corporations. Yeah. So they have similar programs as well.
Gotcha. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I think we've covered a lot today, Karwanna. Any final thoughts for our viewers here before we part ways for the day?
Yeah. So, so definitely, I think that if you are a freelancer, you have an opportunity to really grow, of your freelance business into something stable. So believe in yourself, like you can do it. There's people out there like Matt who open up opportunities as well. And I feel like, you were one of the ones that inspired me to want to achieve that level of success that I've seen you achieve. And I'm like, so I'm actually publishing like my first book. I have a couple ebooks already published. And so that's pretty much I want to say is basically you can do anything that you want to do. And, you get to write the design or design the life that you want to have. It's really about having a vision, writing it out, and then doing the work, like taking action, doing the work that it's going to take to get there.
Awesome. You're such an inspiration, Karwanna. And it's, I really appreciate your kind words. I'm with the executive in Sweatpants thing, it's been a labor of love for me because it's kind of a part-time thing, but I hope that it inspires people like you in some way to do great things. And clearly it's helped in some way for your story. So that's a blessing to me. So thank you.
Thank you.
So I think that wraps it up for today. Thanks again for joining us, Karwanna, and everybody else. Be sure to check out executiveinsweatpants.com for some additional tips on freelancing and outsourcing. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Awesome.